You ready?
Yeah, just,
Okay.
hi, I'm blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Hello there, I'm Roger Waterhouse with Artec Incorporated, and we're talking about the Log House Totem Pole. A couple years ago, Log House Museum came to us and asked if we would be interested in restoring and putting some conservation work into the totem pole. I think you guys may have heard from us from the West Seattle blog. We did some work on the original West Seattle totem pole down by the golf course. So we decided we wanted to take this job on. It's a super interesting pole, has a lot of great history. We became enamored with the energy over in West Seattle from talking with Tracy on the West Seattle blog, and there was a lot of support for the work that we did on the West Seattle totem pole, and it just kind of snowballed from there. We felt like we had to do it, and so she's pretty close to being done. We did pretty much a complete restoration on it. It was in actually really good shape. The people who had stored it did a real nice job of taking care of it. It was up off the ground, away from any big buildups of debris, and I think apparently for the most part had good ventilation, yet still was covered. So there was no growth of anything too detrimental on it. So our work was pretty easy, and it's a really good piece of wood. We basically started with a complete cleaning of the totem pole, dry brush, and then a wet clean, get all the growth that was on it. There was a little bit of lichen and some moss in a few of the little enclosed areas. No bug damage at all, so that was really pleasant to see. Anyway, after the cleaning, we let it set for a while in this space here alongside some other totem poles. And it just naturally dried out or became drier. We don't want them to totally dry out, of course, but there's a certain stage there, a content of moisture that you want it to get to. And at that point, then we started putting some borate-based preservatives in the wood. Let those soak in. Again, it dries a little bit. We put in some penetrating oils, some really light grade oils, for insecticide and fungicide purposes. And then we did a complete repaint. The colors on this pole were taken from the original. There were quite a few areas that we got some good paint samples. We took those samples off. We did a little bit of analysis of what those colors probably were. And it was pretty much a standard brown and black and reds that are traditional in Native American totem poles, and then the green is a little bit different than traditional. However, since we got this pole, or we thought at the time, however, since we got this pole, we have coincidentally worked on a couple other poles from Eastern Washington, carvers from Eastern Washington, and sure enough, this color popped up on those. So I don't know how that relates to the different tribes, indigenous tribes in the area of the Northwest, but this color isn't as uncommon as we thought it would be. So that was kind of nice to see. Anyway, so you got that palette of brown, black, reds, whites, and green. We put 2 coats of paint on each surface, and in between there was probably a week and a half of drying time. We put the paint down into the cracks just in an aesthetic manner. We want to leave the cracks unpainted as much as we can, because when we come in now in a couple weeks, we'll be putting a second coat of a different type of an oil on this, and we want that oil to run in here so that the wood gets re-energized with oil. The cellulose tends to expand and it becomes more water resistant. So a lot of these cracks then will be used as conduits for us to enter for the entry of more oil for preservation purposes. Like I say, there was no insect damage. There's very few areas of loss. So this is 100% wood. Some of these other totem poles, the one next to you, may be a little bit newer pole, but for different reasons we had to put some epoxy-based compounds in the structure of this wood to build up some of the areas of loss. This pole is 100% wood. It's the same as when it was carved for the most part. And so this is one of the few totem poles we've had like that. I'm not really sure why, but probably because it's pretty much 100% paint covered. Doesn't make any difference. It's in good shape. So we're thankful for that. I think probably the last thing we want to say about this pole is that it has so much story and interest in it. The critters, the animal figures and human figures along here are I think probably more, you might say, user friendly, and it's easier. I think it's going to be easier for the public to understand why these are what they are. Pretty much the same characters here that you see in other totem poles, but these were done with a little bit more of a purpose, you might say, for the general public, and at least that's our feeling. And so I think this is going to be a good educational tool, and we've talked about this, the people who have worked on this pole. I think this is one where it's going to be super important to have in the community, because you can go and say, oh, that is absolutely a frog, or that is absolutely a beaver, or no, that's not a raven, that's an eagle. I think you're going to be able to understand the whys and why nots of Native American myth from this pole a little bit easier than some of the other traditional poles carved just for Native American interpretation. So that again was another thing that made this pole just has a little bit more charm.